Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Karl Kapp. You'll definitely want to check out his LinkedIn newsletter. Just search L&D Easter eggs. He's a frequent international keynote speaker, workshop leader, and moderator, author of many leading books in the L&D space, including his newest available now, Action First Learning Instructional Design Techniques to Engage and Inspire. Please show him a warm welcome using your react button. There he is, Dr. Karl Kapp. Welcome, Karl.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Scott, thanks for coming. Always great to see old friend Susie. And so great to have everybody together. I wish I could see everyone's faces. So much fun to be here. So today I want to talk about some practical strategies for adding game elements that engage without backfiring, and talk how that can be accomplished in some of the games that you're developing or working on or playing, or all kinds of things. But the first thing I want you to do is take some action. It's action first learning. So in the chat, go ahead and indicate what makes a game engaging for you. So we talk a lot about engaging and games for learning, but I want to get a sense of what, for some of you, what you think makes it interesting. So people talk about learning elements, competition, easy to play, nice visuals. Some people talk about relatability, interactivity, clear goals, accomplishments, and all happening at a really rapid rate. So keep in mind, when I start talking today about things that help a game, think about aligning those elements that you're thinking of. I think every one of these are pretty much right on track and make a lot of sense in terms of us thinking about others. Now, the one thing I will say is that when we think of what makes a game engaging or exciting for us, notice that there's a lot of different answers here. So as we're developing a game and rolling it out to our audience, our learners, if you will, usually fellow employees or employees for a company that we're consulting with, is what we think make it engaging might not be what makes it engaging for them. So we really need to think about making sure that the game, especially a learning game, is encompassing for our audience, which starts, of course, with our audience analysis, knowing who is going to be playing or engaging with our game. So great responses. Maybe you can take a look and kind of see how many people agree with what you're thinking about, how many people think differently. One more thing I want to do, speaking of audience analysis, is take a couple poll questions, and by a couple I mean three different poll questions. I want to get a sense of your primary reason for incorporating games. So it looks like increasing learner engagement is way up there. So is not using games. Okay, that's interesting dichotomy there. And then I want to know about your experience in successfully using a game. How do you measure that? So some people say it's not measured. Some people say learner satisfaction scores, post-test scores, observable job performance. Yay for that, right? That's what we're all about, observable job performance. That's what we want. Sometimes we can get there from what we're doing. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier. Sometimes there's lots of factors that are involved. And then when game-based learning falls short, what's missing? So I see authentic job-related decision-making, good. And manager reinforcement after the training, yes. And some folks say, yeah, nothing's missing. It works great for us. So if you're in that category, certainly love to hear from you in the comments about what you're doing to make sure that your games are as effective as possible. The thing I like about Training Magazine Network is it's a community of lots of people helping lots of people. So don't be shy about contributing what you know and what you do. Okay, some really good results here from these questions, really interesting in terms of what happens. So let's move along to some of the other elements that I want to look at. So buy-in, absolutely. Getting corporate buy-in is so important, right? Very important. So I'd like to really quickly ask everybody to, if you want, follow me on LinkedIn. I have great discussions like this all the time and love to expand that. Got a YouTube channel. That one of my favorite series is the unofficial, unauthorized history of learning games. And actually one of my guest. Scott is here, who created the Lost Dutchman game, which I'll drop a link into there as well, which is awesome. And then, of course, if you want some summer reading, and Kevin, shout out to you, who said Action First Learning is becoming quickly his favorite book. So I appreciate that, Kevin. But I would just say you need to expand your reading. Some of the Jack Reachers are my favorite books, but maybe favorite L&D book, right? So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So one, I want to identify when game-based learning is most effective. Sometimes we throw game-based learning in for engagement, and it's not really what we want. We want a learning outcome. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about aligning game design with desired outputs. And finally, we're going to look at the steps to design game-based learning that actually transfer to the job, which was one of the things that was mentioned in our survey, like how do you get this transferred to the job? So in order to do this, what I did was I look at an action first learning model and see how that works, right? So the first thing in this model is some kind of a trigger action. So we start the game somehow. Something has to happen. Maybe you have to answer a question or solve a dilemma or do something like that. That's a good way to think about it. So the idea behind action learning is have the learner do something right away, not spend a lot of time. So I had you right away write what makes learning engaging. Then boom, we did a poll question. So we get people started. It doesn't have to be real in depth. It doesn't have to be a total simulation. It can just be getting the learners moving and doing something, responding, making decisions, exploring, solving problems. Then they apply their knowledge. Now, adult learners come to the table with a lot of knowledge. And I really feel that we shortchange our learners when we handhold them. And that's when we lose learners a lot. Like, this is boring. I already know this. I'm not learning anything new. So we need them to do something right away. And hopefully when they do that right away, they find out, oh, there's something I don't know. There's some knowledge I need to get. And so now that makes the opportunity for learning so much greater because they're like, oh, I don't know that. Now they're self-motivated to learn it. So they apply that knowledge. We as designers give them feedback. We do things like give them instruction of what they don't know. We help you with social learning, really interesting new term here that I want to introduce, I think, a little bit later on that I think was very insightful for me. And then we'll talk about the emotional impact of games. And then finally, reflection. I believe there's no learning without reflection. There's only an experience. So what we want to do is provide the learners this ability to reflect. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the other thing that I wanted to do for this particular presentation was I wanted to give you the latest research. So this presentation is based on research that's from 2025 and above, articles published. So to be honest, you know that a lot of times, it takes a couple years for research to surface, right? To actually get published, if you've ever gone through that process. So these are probably written in 23, 24, but published in 25. And one of them is actually published in 26. Now, a little bit of a spoiler alert, none of these contradict previous research. So humans haven't all of a sudden started learning differently from games. This tracks a lot with some research that came from before 2025. So it's nice to know the body of research is still growing, how we learn it through games is still growing, and we're still getting additional insights into all these. And if you get the slide deck, all of these are hot links. So if you want to, cross-reference the research on your own, you can do that as well. So let's go ahead and talk about the distillation of that research. So basically, it comes down to three major areas of effectiveness. Now, there's lots more areas, but we only have so long to cover them. But the first is an intentional alignment of game mechanics with instructional objectives. And so this is an alignment to make everything safe, everything lined up so that the learning matches the gameplay. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, how that works. Then we're going to look at the social interaction, which becomes very important. And then the reflection of a low risk environment that I want to talk about. So let's go ahead and look at alignment first. So alignment is when game-based learning and game elements are aligned with the greater instructional purpose. And the effectiveness depends on matching gameplay mechanics like rules and narrative. I saw a bunch of people say story makes a game engaging for them, but the story has to align with what the learning outcomes are and with the intended learning results. And one way to do that is I use this map. And the map helps me match the content all the way through the gameplay, all the way to the assessment of the learning. So what I look at is the type of content, and we'll talk about content types, declarative, procedural. And then I want to know, what am I teaching under that content type? So here, in this case, it's how to close a sale using a sales example. And then finally, I want to match. So what in the game is matching how to close a sale? So in this case, it might be selecting the right close to the right situation, like the closing technique. And then finally, how am I going to assess that? Maybe accuracy or number of attempts or how long it takes, something like that. So that's the way that you can align the gameplay with everything from your teaching objective to your in-game activity to your assessment of the learning itself. So one of the tools that you can take away from today's session is looking at creating a template like this for the instruction that you're going to deliver. So let's drill down into that just a little bit. Excuse me. So if we look at the different types of knowledge, I'm classifying it into 4 types. There's lots of different ways. Bloom has a way of classifying lots of different ways, but I'm kind of doing a broad brush here. And declarative knowledge is, just memorization. Mnemonics, for example, are declarative knowledge. Homes for the Great Lakes in the United States. But what works well there are matching games, trivia games, and recognition games. So, for example, if you want to match, a term with a 3-letter acronym, putting those together is helpful for declarative knowledge in matching games. Now, we also have conceptual knowledge, which is an idea, like the concept of freedom, the concept of quality in an organization, the concept of customer service. Lots of things go under that concept. What works well for that are games with examples and non-examples. Here's an example of a quality piece produced during production. Here's several examples of non-quality pieces, right? So we look at the game and the exercises and the examples. Procedural knowledge is steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, and problem solving is critical thinking, prioritization, and social games. So these are ways of thinking about mechanics and rules. Stephanie, to answer your question, a game is when you start to have competition, you start to have scoring, and you start to measure the success of the activity. So if you just have an activity, hey, let's do this. Oh, yeah, that's fun. Let's match something. Okay, that's fun. We're matching. But if you count the number of matches, the speed of the match, the quality of the match, we start putting parameters around the success of the activity, then it becomes a game. And the question about whether or not a game or an activity works is a little bit based on your audience. So sometimes I've had audiences where game was a 4-letter word. You couldn't say game, so everything became an activity, right? And so that's kind of one of the elements that happens. Assessment and parameters, rules, and goals make an activity into a game. So for example, Riza, if you and I are splashing around the pool and we're just playing, we're just doing some activities. And then Terry, yes, I am. So yeah, I'm just splashing around the games and some activities. But if I say, hey, I'll race you from point A to point B, now we have a goal. Now we created that into a game. Now, if we're splashing around the pool, and you say, I'm going to race you from side A to side B, and you get out and you run along the side and you jump in, now you're breaking one of the rules of the game, right? So having a goal helps, having rules and parameters help, having measurements of success help. All of those goes into defining the game. So absolutely. So let's look at a game and see how this might work. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share this. And this is a very simple declarative knowledge game. So basically, the learner is going to answer some questions as they go through the process. So let's go ahead and share this screen. And I'm going to share the jumper game and kind of show you how that works. This one's for people that are learning to bag groceries. And so this could be played, on your phone, and you start the game, and this is going to ask me some questions. It has a leaderboard, so I can keep score against myself. So it has the element of competition. But not all games have competition. Some have cooperation. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and I'm going to move my element up, and I'm going to look for question marks. I need to play good. I'm not very good at this game. So I had to take the red eye last night. So I haven't had as much I would like. But this is where I go, and then I answer a question. So it gives me a question about bagging groceries. Now, does this declarative game make me the world's best grocery bagger? The answer is no. But if we look at knowledge from declarative knowledge to problem solving, we can't solve a problem. We can't do a procedure. We can't do an activity unless we know the basic vocabulary. And so declarative knowledge helps me learn the basic vocabulary. Then once I get the basic vocabulary, I move on to the next learning. So sometimes people are like, do this. They say, well, wait a minute. Declarative knowledge isn't that important. We don't need games for declarative knowledge. It's really simple. But if you don't know this knowledge, you can't be successfully later on. And so one of the ways to diagnose if people are learning or not is we look at the knowledge level of declarative knowledge. And if they're not understanding the declarative knowledge, we can't be teaching them problem solving. We can't be teaching them procedures. We have to go backwards. So we can use this to diagnose whether or not people have that knowledge or know that knowledge. So that's one game that I kind of wanted to show and kind of talk about with that information. Okay, so, and I see some of you are answering as well. And I don't want to just show digital games. I also want to show card games or analog games, because a lot of times people say, hey, wait a minute. I don't have a budget for digital games, or I don't want to create a bunch of digital games, or does it all have to be digital games, right? So for that kind of game, declarative knowledge, it's almost always an element of answering questions or identifying information with that kind of game wraparound. So that's that kind of level. Exactly. Yeah, Tiagi is great, Scott, on card games. And so conceptual knowledge. So concepts are classification of ideas, and you do examples and non-examples. So one of the games that we did is we had 4 different teams. These were graduate students, 4 teams of graduate students, and we gave them some cards, and they had to complete the matrix in a completed amount of time. And so it was a race game. They were racing against each other. So basically what happens is we put categories across the top: type of knowledge, definition, telltale verbs, appropriate strategy, example, and game example. So that's kind of across the top there. The down the left-hand side was types of knowledge: declarative, conceptual, procedural, or problem solving. And then when you look at those, Maria, some wargaming I used. But anyway, so we take this kind of information, and we gave the card deck there at the bottom, and you had to put them in the right order. So basically, you had to go, okay, telltale verbs, identify. Okay, what's the concept, appropriate strategy? Oh, a concept map. Oh, okay, what about facts and jargons? That definition. So in this game, it was a race to the finish where the 4 teams raced against each other to fill out the matrix. And as they fill out the matrix, this helped them learn about important concepts of different types of knowledge. So this is a way that you can take conceptual knowledge and make a quick card game out of that conceptual knowledge. And it also works from a sales perspective, like not just graduate school, but here's a sales perspective. So for example, give me some telltale phrases for opening. Give me some strategies for opening. Give me some questions to ask. And so now we can help see if these sales teams understand the concepts that we're providing to them. So this game, we called it Close the Deal. And again, we had teams and they competed against each other to see if they understood and knew the concepts. So those are the kinds of things that work and can be very helpful as well. Let me stop here. So people are asking about, making games. There's several different ways to make a game. This is literally a card game that I made on index cards. And then I went to a place called the Game Crafter. And I have no association with them. And they will print your game for you. So Print and Play will do the same thing. They'll print your card game for you. Now you have to have an artist and you set it up and you can do all that. The digital games here that we were doing, those are through ELB, and they have a thing called the Training Arcade, and they're templates, and I'm going to show a couple other games, templates that you just fill in with your content and have the games done that way. So there's lots of different ways that you can make a game. You can use Captivate. You can use Storyline. You can use all kinds of tools. You can use Lectora, but the Training Arcade has the games already developed that you can go ahead and just fill in those templates, which is pretty nice. You don't have to spend any time with the graphics or the music or anything along those lines. Yeah, you can even use, Susie, great point. You can even use PowerPoint. I just had class last night and we were doing a hangman type game with PowerPoint. And of course, AI is a good one to play with. So let's show a game here. This is a procedural knowledge game. So procedural knowledge is you have to put things in order in a certain amount of time. So let me go ahead and share this game. Sandy will share this screen here. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how this game works. So this game is an instructional design game called Sort It, and in the Training Arcade. And I'm going to go ahead and register there and hit submit. And basically what I need to do is you can do this several different ways. But one way is to place tiles in correct order before the time runs out. So this is, again, a race to the finish. I would do this to make sure that my learners understood the proper sequence of what they had to do. Then I would actually have them do that, right, in a simulation environment. I would evaluate this. But again, you need that foundational knowledge before you jump right into problem solving. So here's that ADDIE model that I think many of you would be familiar with. And so I would say, create a course structure and content. Maybe that's develop, right? Deliver instructional material. Maybe that's implement. Assessment of the training. Maybe that's analyze. Produce materials. Maybe that's, oh, I ran out of time, so I don't get any points. So I could restart the game and redo this over again and try it until I got the right order. And as you can see, it's a little bit of competition because we do have a leaderboard. There's some competition because I have only so much time to do it, with the thought that, hey, if Karl doesn't do this in the right amount of time, he doesn't know it. He's guessing on it. If he does it under a certain period of time, then he's got it. He doesn't know anything about the ADDIE model. All he got was assessment. So this is a way that you can very quickly play a quick game to understand whether or not the person knows the order of a procedure, a process, things like that as you go along. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Now we get to the idea of problem solving. And this is where somebody had mentioned wargaming before. The game on the bottom is a game that was used by the CIA to help track El Chapo. There's now a whole new cartel issue in Mexico, but for a while, remember, we were trying to find El Chapo. And how this wargaming works is you have one team that plays the El Chapo side. You have another team that was playing the CIA side. And in the middle, you have a referee. And so what happens is the El Chapo, the CIA says, hey, we're going to arrest El Chapo and put him in this jail. And they tell that to the referee. And the referee says to El Chapo side, hey, you guys have been arrested. You're going in jail. The El Chapo side says to the referee, hey, we're going to build tunnels. We're going to go out of the jail at night and do our business and come back in and look like we're in jail all the time, right? And he tells that to the referee. And then they have counter elements in the game. And so every move is a counter move. So you're thinking strategy, you're thinking predictive ability. So you're trying to use strategic responses to what other players do. And it creates a very dynamic environment that requires real-time processing of information and data. So that's a way of using kind of war games. And wargaming is used a lot if you look at competitive analysis. Like if we introduce this new product, what is company Y going to do? What will the marketplace do? And you get into these decisions at a very high level. Now, this game here, this white game here, was a game that I developed for Workday. Actually, somebody had mentioned Workday, and they were doing something where they wanted to have different people were getting promoted, and they wanted them to think at the corporate level. So you get promoted from operations, you think about operations, but now you need to think about the corporate level. So how this game worked is in the middle is basically a dashboard, and it has coins in it. And then you get questions. You answer a question, and depending how you answered, and it was 3 rounds, the game, depending on how you answered, you could actually increase customer satisfaction or decrease satisfaction, increase innovationness, decrease innovationness, do lots of different things as you go through that game. And it was played around a circle for social interaction. So those are the ideas behind problem solving. So when you think about creating a game, you need to align the gameplay with the type of game. If it's declarative knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, you're putting things in order, or if you want more problem solving or critical thinking. Those are some elements that you need to think about that. Eric, we played this board game for I think it was like a 2-hour session, 3 days. So that's one way to think about it. You could also do we're not talking about it today, but you can do kind of an escape room game where you can actually do it in an hour. Like escape room's an hour, so you have 1 hour to do this, and then we go ahead and debrief. So the first element of effective games is aligning the right game with the right strategy, right? The right kind of knowledge, that alignment. Now, the next element is social interaction. So this is where the board games come into play, and you think about those games and how those work. Yeah, Scott's got a good answer to that. He's got the game that I am going to actually, Scott, I'm going to put this into the, here's a link about a little bit about Scott's game there. You can take a look at it, and I'm sure he can tell you more because it's a very effective social collaborative game that really provides some really good insights at some aha moments as the players are playing in this social interaction. But if we've got social interaction, remember those studies that we looked at, social interaction was highly rated as a motivational factor. People like the motivation, right? So self-determination theory, Laura, I love your answer because you work 8 hours a day, and maybe you're doing a good job, maybe you're not doing a good job, but we don't want to take 4 hours to train someone how to do their job better. And it's not you. It's like, that's how management thinks, right? Just do your work. Somehow you'll figure it out. And yeah, we figure it out by making mistakes on the job, by dissatisfying customers, by making errors, but we are not taking the time to do the training. So not to pick on you, but that is a very common management pushback. And I always like to say to them, well, then let's just keep doing it as inefficiently and ineffectively as possible. Let's have bad management. Let's have bad systems by all means, but let's not get away from that bad processes that we're doing, right? I mean, that's kind of, if you think about it to its logical conclusion. But thanks for that comment. I'm on a soapbox about that, so that's why I picked that up. But anyway, so we look at self-determination theory, and self-determination theory basically says that we're motivated by three elements. We're motivated by mastery, that we can get a sense of mastery. We're motivated by the fact that we're able to be involved with others. And we're motivated by the sense of mastery. We can do it. Autonomy, which we have decisions, like we can decide to do this or not decide to do this or decide to do that. Those kind of things all come into a play. So you can even do social interactions, of course, sitting around a board game, but we can also do social interactions online. We often don't think about that, but if I could share one more game, this was a social interaction for some managers around budgeting. And, budgeting is always an issue that people wonder about. So I'll go ahead and share this screen, and I'm going to share the screen of the budgeting game here called Budget Battles. And basically, this is a game where you can kind of see an entire board game, and you can play it by teams. So you could, bring it up on Zoom, or you can bring it up in this environment. You can spin your spinner, and you're on the board, and then you move a certain number of spots. You choose which category you want to answer a question from, and then you get asked a question related to that. The questions are important to get the answers and understand that, but what's really important is the social interactions talking about the concepts in the game. So I'm going to stop sharing. We'll take a look at that. That's the idea here, as I was talking about, of this liminal gameplay, which I think is so important and so interesting. So liminal gameplay discussions, and some of those research articles I talk about this. But basically, think about when you play a game and you have this spontaneous, peer-directed dialogue and interaction about the game. And it turns out valuable peer-to-peer learning happens when we discuss that experience. Like, hey, you answered that question. How'd you know that answer? Or how'd you figure that out? Or what was the way that you decided to block the tunnels in the El Chapo game? Like, why did you decide to do that? So not only are you then the gameplay, what you're learning from there, oh, that's the right answer, but you're also mining the knowledge of your peers. And that's something that we often don't do. We often don't mine the knowledge of our peers. But in a game situation, when you have the discussion, you're like, oh, okay, that's why now I see your thinking process. It's that thinking out loud that makes that happen. So, social learning theory and social construction theory from Bandura. So that way you get huge value about highlighting gaps in your own knowledge. And the other interesting thing, this is not like a designer or a trainer telling you, hey, Karl, you didn't know this. I can't believe you didn't know this. Wow, I'm surprised you're even still working here because you should have. Oh, Karl did that. Oh, okay. I'm going to file that away. I'm going to use that in my next interaction with the customer. Oh, that makes sense, right? And so that's really how that works. And some peers don't share, absolutely. However, in a game environment, sometimes games are called social accelerants, because people get socially involved in a game and they tend to share more. They tend to let their guard down a little bit. They tend to interact a little bit more in a game environment rather than a quote unquote work environment. even if the game is in a work environment. So sometimes we can get to those pieces of information through having more of this social accelerant experience. Not always, but often that can happen. So this peer-directed insights, because a game gets rid of like the hierarchy, right? And so traditional instruction, expert to novice, peer sharing knowledge, this allows us to actually share one-on-one and have those experiences, which can be really helpful and exciting as you go through that. So thinking about the social interactions is pretty important. So if we go back to, I'm going to go back to one of the games here. Whoops, no, I'm not going to share. I'm actually going to go back to one of the slides. Sorry about that. And I'm going to go to the problem solving slide. So here in the problem solving slide, that game that I was talking about for teaching different elements. So that game was to teach traditional people who were in charge of at the organizational level. And when we think about those people at the organizational level, we had 3 teams. We had an operations team, we had a sales team, and we had a human resource team. So each game had 9 players, 3 people on each team. And then they would get this dilemma that they had to solve. And the first time we played it in round 1, because I want to show kind of that liminal discussion going on. In round 1, it was over 3 days. It was at a executive retreat. And in round 1, we didn't do any debriefing or anything. We just said, go ahead and see what you can do. And we found that a lot of times the 3 people in the operations team were not talking to the 3 people in the sales team, who were not talking to the 3 people in the HR team, right? Now, in your organization, sales probably always consults with operations before they make a big sale. So that's not an issue. But in this company, sometimes sales didn't talk to operations. They promised things that they were kind of pretty sure could be delivered, but weren't 100% certain could be delivered. And so round 1, there was almost no inner discussions, and there was very low profitability. In between round 1 and round 2, we said, hey, probably nobody had these issues, but if you did, let's explain how you could address some of these issues through communications, through thinking at the enterprise level, through various elements. And round 2, without us explicitly telling them what to do, they all of a sudden started to communicate more and more effectively. So the idea is that once you have an experience, like one of these games experiences, it primes you for a learning experience. And then by playing the game again, gave the opportunity to apply that knowledge that you just gained. So one of the things that I think gets lost in games, especially if you're doing like a problem solving game, a board level game, is the ability to practice. We all know that practice helps us get better. We know that. But in organizations, oftentimes training is given with little to no practice. Yeah, I got this. I've been a salesperson for 15 years. I don't need to practice closing a sale. But in essence, you practice every time you're with a customer. And you get no feedback. Like, did you do it right or not? Well, the feedback is you don't get the sale. But why didn't you get the sale? You don't know, right? It's a numbers game. I just, keep trying to do it. But if you could practice a close and get feedback on what you did well and what you didn't do well, then next time you have a better chance of closing the sale. Same thing with the game, but the game does it in a very safe, very non-threatening environment. So that is really helpful. So if we go back to here and we finish up talking about games. So we talked about the social interactions. We want to have the games done in a low risk environment, right? We want the games to feel psychologically safe. We want to have enough at risk, like risking points or something along those lines, but not so much like that you get fired, that you don't get your bonus, that you don't get your sale, anything like that. So when perceived risk is low, defensiveness decreases. Like you don't get as, oh, well, I would never do that. Oh, that's not the situation, right? Learners shift from protecting themselves to exploring options. So what we want to do is encourage learners to explore options. So if I'm at work, there's no way I want to try out an answer that I'm pretty sure is wrong. So we don't take risks. And we don't grow because we're not taking risks, right? So the idea here is if we actually give an environment where it's okay to take risks. And one of the things that happens with games, if you have multiple rounds of a game, you know you can take a risk. And I often say, how do you know you can take a risk in a game? How do you know? You know because you have 3 hearts in the upper left-hand side of your game. So you know you can burn 2 of those hearts taking a risk before you have to start over, right? And that can be very helpful from a psychological safety perspective, as Lydia is saying here. So exploration, if we want humans to grow, if we want our team to grow, if we want the employees that we help teach to grow, and I would argue that some organizations don't. They have job A and all you do is job A, and I don't want you to grow out of job A because we need you to do job A. But in organizations where we want employees to grow, exploration, testing our skills, looking at our limits, that becomes really important for skill development. We all talk about, we want people to develop their skills, but do we force them into situations where they have to get to the edge of their current skill set, right? The zone of proximal development. So if you get to that zone, then you can push your skills to the next level. And we can't do that unless we have a training situation that allows safe failure, but has failure, has mistakes, has things that you can do wrong so that you can then in the future do better. So it's a fine line. You want these mistakes. You want these things to happen. In fact, there was a research looking at students doing math problems and found out that there was greater electrical activity in the brain when we guessed at an answer than when we knew the answer. Possibility, which is really, I think, kind of interesting. So low risk environments promote repeated experimentation. So I can try this again and again and again. Players can test multiple approaches. That's why it's a good idea, if you can, let players play games over and over and over again. So if you look at Candy Crush, for example, and Candy Crush, it's literally basically the same game over and over and over again, but I test new strategies and they give me new challenges, right? So when you think about a game, and maybe you say it's expensive to develop or it takes a long time to deliver or whatever, think about, can we reuse this over again so the learner can get better and better and better? Again, often in training, we say, hey, I'm going to give this to you one time and then you'll know it forever. Once I show you the 3 chords on a guitar, you will know them forever. You will never need to practice again. Completely not true. Completely not true. But we do it in corporate training over and over and over again. You want a football example? Tom Brady, arguably the best quarterback that's ever lived, goes to practice, stays after practice, comes in early for practice. He's Tom Brady. He knows everything about football. Why is that man practicing? Because he wants to be better. Because he knows practice will make him better. How come your salesperson of 25 years doesn't need training or practice? They know what they're doing, even though their hit rate is 1 in 4, right? It makes no sense, but we do it all the time. Practice is where training should be. Yeah, actually. I know, I do feel like I'm on the soapbox. Anyway, so immediate feedback supports rapid adjustments. Learners refine strategy through cycles of action and reflection. So this is where that reflection comes in. After you have people play a game, have them reflect. Force that liminal discussion if it's not happening naturally. And that's also one other thing I'll say is games provide space, right? You say, hey, we don't have time for a game, but after a game, it's that discussion, reflection, strategizing what I would have done different next time that solidifies that knowledge. And if we skip that, solidified. Yeah, Sandra, great. Olympics, all kinds of examples, except in training, right? We don't do that in learning and development. So that's what we want to do. So make sure that you create, simulated low risk environments for helping people to become better, allow learners to rehearse decisions before making real world decisions, giving them feedback on those decisions, let them make mistakes in the game, ground them in experience, not theory, so they have confidence, and then finally, get them ready for that particular experience. So again, different games for different purposes. If I want to teach declarative knowledge and know what you're teaching, right? If I want to teach declarative knowledge, I have a certain set of games. If I want to do concepts, I have a different set of games where I'm categorizing, I'm figuring things out. If I'm not against activities, if you decide, hey, let's do an activity instead of a game, that's fine. Games have, not for everybody, but have a little bit more of motivation, have a little bit more of an evaluative element of it, have a little bit more of a goal element of it. All those things can be really helpful. And then match the right game to what you want to teach, and then get to, if you can, these ideas where I'm practicing what I'm doing on the job, I'm getting feedback, and then I'm able to do what I need to do effectively. All of those can be really important. Okay, so summary, that was kind of summary, but in the chat, I'd love to have you write 3 things that you learned about applying game elements to instruction. Go ahead and do that. And then I will also answer some questions. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A right on the dot there. And let's go ahead and answer some questions.
All right.
Sandy,
Did you want me to kind of highlight a few that came in?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, just so you know, Lydia was amazing and spot on, delivering some great commentary and answering your questions as well. But I'd
Okay,
like to hear
am
you.
I done?
No, well, I'd
Awesome,
kind of like
thanks,
to get your
Lydia.
perspective too, because
Well, I
yeah,
always tell my students it's better to get multiple perspectives because I do not know
exactly.
everything. Yeah.
Right, right. Well,
Thank you, Lydia.
Terry had made the comment earlier that they're cognizant of the risk of rewards and competitions in games. I'm wondering if or how you mitigate those risks in your game design content. And you gave us that great slide that creating that low risk environment. Perhaps you could tell us, what is the mistake that you're seeing over and over and over when you see people designing games that doesn't create that low risk environment?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Um, so one of the things that you should do is make the reward for winning the game as low stakes as possible. Because the higher stake you make the reward, the more people will compete for the reward and lose sight of the learning. A great example of this, one time I was doing a game and the reward was a candy bar. And you would have thought that I was giving away like solid gold bars. There was literally in the hallway a candy machine, and I said, whoever wins gets this candy bar, and people were like at each other's throats. And so I'm like, for a candy bar, right? So now I do the winner of the game receives accolades throughout the land. The same thing that if you win the Iron Chef, you get accolades, because you want the focus to be on the learning. The other thing that I often talk about is setting up the game. So a lot of times we say, oh, we're going to see this game, whichever team gets, to go to lunch first or whatever. But I often spend a lot of time going, okay, we're going to have this experience. We're going to play this game. And we're going to then debrief the game. So I want to know first of all, what you've learned. Second of all, what strategies did you use? Third of all, what would you do different if you played the game again? So I front load the experience with things that aren't really fun, right? Oh, you mean I have to debrief this? I have to write it down. I have to think about this. Oh, geez. but I do that to make it very low risk. The other thing I do is if I'm in a classroom environment, I'll stop and it's too risky. It's escalating. I'll stop and reconfigure the teams to kind of low down that competition. And sometimes I'll say, look, it's not really about um, um, uh, uh, the winning. So you can do it. So you can add in things in the game that are more cooperative. Like, so that game that I showed for Workday, the team in the end that was most cooperative and least competitive was the team that did the best. So we kind of developed those elements in there as well. And I see that Terry's question about cooperative games. So make games. So one of the ways to do a game where people have to cooperate is you give different people in the game either different skills or abilities or different levels of information. So everybody doesn't have all of the information. And the only way to get all the information is to cooperate with someone else. So a commercial game that people may be familiar with is called Forbidden Island. And that has different roles on it. And so one role is like the helicopter pilot that has to launch everybody off the island. One role is a scuba diver that can swim from one sunken place to another. And without those two working together, you can't get off the island. So having people have either certain skills in the game that other people don't have in their role, having certain information that they don't have in their role, having to pull resources is a good way to do that. It's where, Riza and Chris were talking about Forbidden Island and Pandemic. They're games where the players work against the game instead of the players working against each other. So if you can create a learning game where the players have to work against the game and team up on the game, that creates a more cooperative environment than having the players have to compete with one another. I mean, so it's very funny. I did a game for a sales group one time, and one woman came up to me and said, I hope this isn't a competitive game. She says, I compete every day, all day. I don't want to do it in training. But we naturally think, oh, salespeople, they want to compete, so let's make it a competitive game. Maybe they don't want to compete, right? Maybe they just want to cooperate with people that they work with. So think about that as you're putting your game together as well.
Beautiful.
So great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, we did have a question from Kristen that said, how do you overcome the perception that games equal not serious content? My content is technical and serious for customers, not L&D.
Yeah. So the U.S. Army uses games in life and death training. The medical industry uses games in life and death training. The CIA uses a game to catch El Chapo. They ain't playing. They ain't playing. So games are a way of delivering a learning experience, just like a lecture, just like an audio, just like a video. So I always say if an organization if you don't want to use games, use the term like tabletop simulation or content practice or experience enhancement, right? The idea and if a game's used frivolously, 100% agree, then it's a joke and let's not do it. But if you align the learning objective with the in-game activities, with the assessment, and you're confident that's going to help your employees be better, then use that technique. You don't have to use the word game. You don't have to use all that accoutrements. You don't have to have cute little figures. You could do, so very interestingly, in one of the videos on Unofficial, Unauthorized, I talk about Chicago, and I saw somebody made a comment that I'm in Chicago in February, and it feels like Chicago in February. I love that comment. But they actually did a tabletop simulation on what if a virus came in from China and affected people in Chicago. And Chicago was actually better prepared for the COVID experience than other cities because they had their emergency responders had gone through this exercise. So sometimes games are just thinking about the unthinkable, thinking about things that you normally wouldn't consider. And those are things that can help you become better. So if your group says, no, this isn't serious, this isn't, talk about that as an experience enhancement or a tabletop activity or something like that. Don't throw away the process because people don't like the term. Use the process, change the term.
Beautiful. Well, we do have time for one more question, but before we do that, I just want to go to my ending layout in case any of you have to dash off. Hopefully, you'll give us a rating in the upper right corner. You can continue to chat in the lower right corner with your questions. We've got all the digital downloads available to you, and if you're interested in taking that leadership survey, and then we'd also like to know what your takeaways are and if there's other topics you'd be interested in. And Karl, as this final questions, how do you, Crystal was asking, how do you suggest incorporating social learning into e-learning that is completed individually? Have you seen any good examples, or is that possible?
Yeah. So, so one of the more interesting things I've seen is that this was in a company that did some compliance training. They wanted to have a conversation about it because they weren't always as in compliance as they weren't as compliant as they wanted to be, and they had people like randomly taking it. But they had this compliance challenge office hours, and so after you completed the course, you were invited. I think there was a small like gift certificate for coffee or whatever, so if you showed up. But if you showed up, then they had a discussion. They forced that liminal discussion, right? They had that discussion about what was going on. And it really helped socialize the experiences that they were happening in that training experience.
Mm-hmm.
So scheduling or forcing that liminal discussion. I've also seen elements where people said, hey, same thing we did here, write up what you really learned or discovered during that course anonymously in like a discussion board, and got some really good organic discussions about, oh, I didn't know this was a problem, or, oh, I thought this was a problem. Oh, I thought this wasn't something that I should do. And it had really rich discussions around that as well. So that's another way to think about it, and to provide that kind of a peer-to-peer discussion in a non-peer-to-peer e-learning environment.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I want to give you the last word, Scott, but I do first want to thank our sponsor, ELB, and thank you specifically to Lydia, who's been answering questions in the chat like a rock star. Definitely want to check out ELB Learning. And on behalf of Training Magazine Network, Karl, thank you so much for always sharing your time and your talents and your energies and your insights and your research. Just amazing. You blow me away, and our audience is so grateful as well, as you can see. So I'll leave you the last word before we turn off this recording and get it published to our website.
Well, so go make games, right?
I love it.
You're gonna learn so much more if you go and try to do this, and are successful or fail miserably. Then try again, right? Resilience is, it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get back up. And so take this advice, go create great games and great experiences.
Great. Wonderful, Karl. Thank you. I will brag a little bit. I was at a learning conference and I created a game using index cards, but they were all professionally typed and everything. It was for L&D professionals, and they were just discussion questions, and it was so powerful because you got them into small groups and they got to reflect on this question, share their expertise, and I just felt so proud of myself that I did that little game. So take Karl's advice. Go make games. It doesn't need to be complex. You can make it simple. All right.
So I'm sorry. One more thing, and I don't mean to.
Yes, please. Please go.
What do they say? Unabashed. Anyway, so somebody said, I was all intimidated about creating games. Well, Sharon Bowler and I wrote a book called Play to Learn, which is literally a recipe. So if anybody wants to put in there, wants to actually build a game and get another resource, it literally walks you through step one, step two. There's 9 steps in the process. That book will help you create your own learning game.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks, Karl, for putting the name of the book in there.
I saw that in one of the takeaways, and Darlisa, I think, asked about that, so I wanted to share that with everybody.
Wonderful. Well, I want to also give a shout out to our special members in the audience that shared your expertise and information, like Scott. You all are amazing. I knew that our audience has a lot of amazing experience to share as well, and you really brought it today. So thank you. I know this one is definitely people are going to want to go back, visit the recording, look at the transcript, look at the chat. So many wonderful ideas shared today. Thank you again, Dr. Karl Kapp, and thank you to our members, and thank you to our sponsor, ELB Learning. And Lydia, you guys are all amazing. Go forth and make games.